All right, I have the great pleasure of bringing on my guest, Greg Hammond, who is with the marketing team at Concept Two. You've been there You've been there about 20 years, haven't you?
27, almost 28. Yeah.
My goodness, man. It's funny because leading into this interview, I thought, let me do a little research, do a little backstory. And I went onto the Concept 2 website and started looking at the history of the company. Man, it's 1976 is when it was founded.
That was the oars. Yeah. So we started with the oars, carbon fiber oars, which if anyone watched the Olympics this year, over 90% of the oars were Concept 2s across all countries. So we are still the world leader by far in oars. But yeah, we started there. The first rowing machine was in 1982, and that was the Model A. And since then, I can't remember when the Ski Erg came out, about maybe 2011, 12, something like that. Don't quote me on it. It's right around there. But yeah, we've been. Things move slow here, but it seems like things went by fast. So,
well, I have to tell you. Now I'm assuming that the company is still privately owned, right?
Oh yeah. As a matter of fact, Peter and Dick, the founders, are next building right now, working on things and coming to work every day. And we're still a family-owned company. Yep.
That's bizarre. I would imagine.
It is.
So I have a lot of questions regarding technique and things like this, but I was kind of taken back. I'm a business guy, so I was taken back by the depth of this company and the fact that it's still privately owned. And now, you and I had this conversation about you having a conversation with people in China for Hyrox. You guys have been everywhere.
I often say when I retire, I'm going to do an expose on the fitness industry with everything I've seen in 30 years and the changes and the cycles. And I know you've seen the same thing, even since I got my degree in health science, and the differences between long, slow distance training and nutrition for training, and everything that was right was wrong and is now right again, and things like that. It's amazing. And luckily you and I did most of our fitness before we had quote unquote influencers telling everybody their professional opinions with no science behind it at all.
Yeah, buddy. And you know what? And it's, I have to bite my finger when I'm watching social media and some of the things that are being spewed out by potentially elite athletes, and don't even get me started. But
yeah, anyway. Well, maybe you and I will start our own podcast when I'm done working.
I'm ready. I am ready. I need that kind of motivation to do this type of thing. I don't do it that often anymore. I'm trying to line some people up simply because I need to do it. I need to do it.
Yeah.
So a couple things. Now, a question that was being tossed around between me and one of my clients. Obviously, aside from you and I being together here right now, this is where I do my business Monday through Wednesday with my clients. A client sitting where you are right now, and we're discussing their training and, providing their training program and whatever. But in the course of conversation, and by the way, about 80% of my clients now are Hyrox athletes.
Wow, that's great.
So, and I've seen the evolution from back in the day. It was triathlon, that was my thing. For years and years and years, from the 80s, I was in, actually even further back than that. I used to own the Maui Triathlon, and for 1981 to 83, we put on the first pro race for CBS Sports in 1984. That was my jam. And then came obstacle course racing, which was the new thing. And, I spent about 10 years in that work. And then, boom, we got hit with another one. Now, Hyrox is the new thing. So, with fitness, everything's a trend. And it's cyclical. Yep. It's cyclical. What happened once upon a time will come back again. But anyway, the where I'm going with this is that I was curious to know whether, and you don't have to give me hard numbers, but just broad stroke, is Hyrox now becoming the lead business for you guys, aside from just households and that kind of thing?
It's funny you said. So, it's a big part of our market, but at least when I went to the Miami Hyrox and was at my booth, I think we have a lot of basically repeat customers. They were already doing functional fitness of some kind, whether it be CrossFit or their local functional fitness gym. So, a lot of them were already there. So they were already our customers. Of course, it might have been a customer for a rowing machine, and then Hyrox came and they bought a ski erg, something like that. So it is definitely a plus for us in sales. But we were very slow to get on board initially when they came to us because we weren't sure how it was going to work out. And it has worked out really, really well. And we plan on building the relationship. We always say, being a family-owned company, most of the events we're involved in is because they were events that we would want to do ourselves. And we're always up for a good party. And when we started going to these, we realized these are fitness people who are out there for a good time, almost like you remember, like the 5Ks on a Saturday was like, or the local triathlon where you'd meet your friends and you'd work out hard, you'd slap each other on the backs and congratulate them, and it was a good time. And I got that vibe from Hyrox. It's a party for 80% and it's a competition for 20%. Not stressful competition, but one where they're really going for the time. But yeah, so I can't say how much it's increased, but I would say it's definitely helped overall. So.
Would you say that now I don't know what the term I want to use is, the buy-through, comparatively speaking, to CrossFit, is it anywhere close to what expect to have done with Hyrox? You have CrossFit in one end, you got my sense, and the vibe out there is CrossFit's kind of on the downswing, and then Hyrox is on the upswing. Are you seeing that?
Maybe on the competition side, maybe not your everyday CrossFitter in the affiliate, but it's for people who want to be competitive in a sport. CrossFit's gotten very difficult to compete at a high level, where Hyrox is, I think right now it's a little easier to get into it at a higher level, but it's not going to last long because the studs that I've been seeing at Hyrox now are just, you got to be you got to be a really good endurance athlete who also carries some mass as well. So they make a very aesthetic athlete and actually a good worker per se. But yeah, it's hard to say with CrossFit. I still enjoy the sport, but I don't compete anymore. I enjoy doing the training. One thing that's interesting with Hyrox, though, is like, say you want to be a Hyrox athlete and you have a certain amount of money to spend for your home gym for training. You need less stuff for Hyrox. You don't, and so that might benefit us because of the stuff you need. 2 of them are ours, of the 8 or whatever, and or 7. So it's good for us. We don't make sled pushes or any of the other stuff, but there's room for other companies to come in and do that stuff. So, but it's a lot of crossover. I would say for over 50% of the people I was talking to at the Hyrox that I was at, people that I know either had done CrossFit for a number of years or was currently still doing CrossFit, and then they're getting together their CrossFit friends and like, let's go do the Hyrox. There's going to be one in town. Let's go do it. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I own all 3 pieces. I have the Ski Erg, I have the Rower, and I have the Concept 2 bike. By the way, I love the bike. Coming from a cycling background, I was surprised at the feel of that bike. And listen, I used to own health clubs and we had spinning and the whole thing. So the idea of getting on a stationary bike and training on it and whatever, I'm well versed in that. But the difference between a spinning bike and what the Concept 2 bike does, way different, way different.
It makes me glad that you say that, because when we came out with it, we weren't sure what people were going to think, but what we have always done is made equipment that we would use ourselves. So the owners are rowers. So they made a rowing machine that was the best they could make for their sport. And a lot of us were Nordic ski racers in college, or we were coaches, myself included. And so we wanted a machine that would really help us in our sport. And then for recycling, most of us were mountain bikers. So we wanted a range with our damper settings where it could feel like a road bike or it could feel like a mountain bike. And you didn't have that heavy flywheel making your feet spin around. And we're like, well, if nothing else, some people will like it, but it's really, especially in the last couple of years, gotten real popular. Made me feel good as we work. Well, so Lance Armstrong bought one of our bikes, and regardless of what people might think of Lance, he spent more time in the saddle than almost anybody, and he prefers our bike. So when he said that, I was like, well, that's the pinnacle, I guess. I don't know too many people who have been in the saddle as much as that guy has. So
you're also aware that he, I think it was it Chicago or New York?
Oh, New York. Wait. Yeah, New York.
He competed in a Hyrox event.
And it's funny because when I was talking, he moved to Austin, and I was talking to him about me doing mine, and he goes, "Do you think I'll like it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think you're going to love it." And I just thought he was just saying it. And then next thing I know, he posts on his social that he was doing it. And I'm like, he didn't waste any time. So
yeah, well, not to kick a dead horse, but just what my observation has been is that coming away from the Spartan racing and the whole obstacle course racing, running up and down a mountain, the injury rate was really high. And it seemed like the athletes, they were all about the challenge. That's the whole thing with this is, I'm going to suck it up and I can do it, type of mentality. And they get hurt. They're twisting ankles. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen an athlete come to me with a jacked up ankle or something that's gone. I got a client right now, broke 2 ribs in a race recently. And where Hyrox is fitness oriented, it's like I'm taking athletes from other sports and putting them into Hyrox, not to compete, but because it's going to bring up their fitness levels. They're going to be stronger. They're going to be more resilient. And then it's going to allow them to, bridge off into other things and be less likely to hurt themselves. And I'm actually seeing that a lot now. So I've had people that they were on the bench for one reason or another, plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendonitis, hurt their hip, hurt their back. And I, get them away from it for a while and getting them on like a Concept 2 rower, getting them on the skier, getting them on the bike, getting them into some of the functional exercises. All of a sudden they're getting stronger. They're dropping body fat. They're getting in a better physical place. So I've so far come to enjoy the sport. And again, I'm a fly on the wall. I'm not about to go out there and do this myself. But working with the athletes, and I shared with you that I've been doing work with Hyrox athletes, aside from the other athletes I do stuff with. But very specifically, I've been doing VO2 max testing on all 3 disciplines. So we'll do a simulation where, I got a clinic we're doing here in 2 weeks. I got some guys coming down from Connecticut, somebody from New Jersey. They come from everywhere else. They don't live here. And what we will do is I'll put them on the treadmill, do a gait evaluation, gait analysis, gait corrections, VO2 max test on the run, take them upstairs, put them on the rower, VO2 max test on the rower, VO2 max test on the ski erg. And so from a competitive perspective, what I'm looking at is cost analysis. What is it costing you to create the work that you're creating? So on the ski erg and the rower, what we're doing is we're looking at the watts that you're generating relative to the expense. So we set the computer on watts, and I want you exclusively to look at your watts. And then I'm going to, because I'm seeing on the fly how closely they're getting to their threshold or whether they've achieved their threshold and what the heart rate was relative to the watts they're generating. Because, I've done this a lot years ago with triathletes that are looking at power, cyclists that are looking at power. And I said, well, power is half the equation. What you can create is one thing, but what are you spending to get it? That's what you need to know. And this is something that has kind of fallen away. People aren't looking at that. And you probably know this to be true. Most of the people, the customers that you have using your devices, they set their computer up on their 500 meter time, and they're looking at what their 500 meter time is looking at. So let's just say you're having you're going to do for sake of Hyrox, you're doing a 1K event, and your goal is to generate like a 140 pace. Let's just say that, right? per 500. And today, your heart rate's 150 beats per minute on average to create that. And so everything is all wonderful. One day you come back and you're not quite being able to hit that 140. So you're pushing harder, and now you're at 160. So you're now working harder to get paid less or the same, right? So the education I'm providing is the awareness of what the expense is relative to the yield. I do the same thing on both like I said, the ski erg and the rower. So then we take that, same thing with the run. We look at their pace. I have a thing I call trust but verify. This is an old Reagan thing, right? Trust but verify. I've just done a VO2 clinical assessment on you, and I see what is suggesting your threshold is or where the energy is coming from. Now I'm going to take you out and run you. I get next to them on a little e-bike with all my computer stuff on the bike. I'm monitoring pace. I'm monitoring heart rate. I'm monitoring, the distance we're traveling, whatever, relative to what is sustainable. And I look at perceived exertion. So how does it feel on a 1 to 10 level? And I do the same thing while they're being tested. I'm a 6, I'm a 7, I'm an 8. And I might find that the numbers from the test were not really bearing the same fruit that the sustainability really was. So we compare it that way. And so when I send them home again, we've refined the way they move. We've educated them on the cost of work and how better to approach their training with this. And I think I mentioned to you, I don't know anybody else is doing this.
No, but I have to say that, I've done other podcasts about Hyrox, and everyone says, what's your tips? And a lot of it is just, you said, it's know your pacing. And one thing that throws people off, for some reason, people really worry about the ski erg more than they probably should. And because it's the first event and they're fresh, I see a lot of people go out way too hard and pay the price. Now, the fact that it's kind of interesting that that's the first, your first event you're going to get to. I would say most people, and I mean, I know from years on the ski erg kind of what my pay should be for 1,000 and stuff like that. But the majority of people in Hyrox that are still new to the ski erg have not figured pacing out. What you're doing for them is really interesting. And actually, like if I was to do it again and I had that information that you were going to give, I would really be looking probably more at my heart rate than I would be the monitor, if I knew the numbers that you were going to say. But I mean, for me, it was all monitor. And then also too, there's so much more quad dominant movements that getting off the rower, I would have paced that more too, because when I came off the rower and had to do the burpee broad jumps, every time I jumped, my quads wanted to cramp. But I also can't be the Concept 2 guy and have crappy Concept 2 scores. So I had the added pressure of going harder on our equipment. So.
Yeah, well, and then so the other consideration is it's not an individual sport. So you can maybe produce a really good time on either the ski erg or the rower, but it's not taking into account you're running into those exercises and then having to run out of those exercises. So the consequence of the work on the event or the exercise is only as important as what you're going to be able to produce after the fact, right? So you might find that you have to curb your enthusiasm in the run going into an exercise, or because you beat yourself up on the exercise, you're forced to retard your effort coming out. So we look at that too. So we'll do a simulation. I'll have them actually go through a test where I'll run them a mile, bring them back. We've done some crazy stuff in here. They call it the secret lab. It's like no joke. No, there's no sign anywhere that says, "Hey, this is where that guy does this stuff." It's just word of mouth. People know we do it, and we also did a lot of heat block work, which is kind of unique and new, really, these days, where we're putting heat sensors on them. I mean, I've actually gone through the trouble of sticking these guys in plastic suits, running them in the heat. It's some summer, it was in the 90s. Have them run for a mile in the plastic suit, bring them back in with the suit on, and then do a VO2 max test on them while they're in that suit. And that changes everything. It's like now you're lit. Your heart rate's been through the roof for the last 20 minutes, and you're sweating like a pig, which is going to cause your heart rate to go up. and the whole thing. So we started looking at heat indexes, what they're able to sustain, and how best to acclimate to that effort during stress. Because as you probably are aware, well, you did Miami, did you say?
Yeah, it was Miami. I mean, it was really hot outside, probably
Yeah, I was
100
gonna say.
degrees. But the inside was air conditioned, but it actually was really hard for me. So first of all, I don't like being indoors for anything, but with the fluorescent lights and the noise and the concrete that you're running on, as opposed to, like, I trail run, I rarely run on even asphalt. So a lot of the pain my body felt after the event was probably more from that than the actual movements, which, for my everyday workouts, the weights weren't anything that should have made me that sore, but the ankles, hips, knees, that sort of thing really took a toll. So.
Well, so then the other consideration is these venues, as they get more and more crowded, all those bodies in a building really generate a lot of heat.
That's true. Yes. Yeah.
I was in, I think I was in, was it Chicago? I went to a couple of these events. I think it might have been Chicago, oh no, it was DC. And I was talking to Meg Jacoby after the race. And I said, well, Meg, did you think it was hot in here? She's going, oh my God, are you kidding me? She goes, I was dying. And so this is another factor. It's like, aside from how much work you can do, how much heat are you generating, and what are you capable of producing under those circumstances? And so I look at all that stuff, and it's been fun. But anyway, so enough about that. I wanted to talk about technique a little bit. So,
Sure.
and I'm sure that you probably, bite your finger when you're at this event and watch people on the ski erg,
And the rower, both.
Well, I honestly, I know I might be wrong, but my estimation is that it's a little easier to look like you know what you're doing on the rower than on the ski erg. And I've seen top flight guys on the ski erg, and it's like they're butchering it, man.
They are. It's funny though, because I've always said I thought the ski erg was much easier to learn good technique than the rower. But it's, I think it's just people just haven't done a lot of. We saw this in CrossFit too. When the machine, the first couple of years we used the ski erg, everybody looked like crap. And same with the rower when I first, way back in 2007, when we were at the first CrossFit Games. But the elites figure it out, and so they need to search it out. So, as you get better with the athletes into the higher echelons, the technique looks a lot better. But really, people should look at the ski erg, because to do it correctly and get that core engagement as opposed to using the small muscle groups, I don't feel is as hard to learn as the rower, which has a lot more going on during the rowing stroke. So, but again, also too, when I was competing, I didn't help anybody.
No, I wouldn't either. So I pulled this from your site. Here it is. This is virtually, I don't know if you can see this very well, but this is virtually an explanation of how to conduct yourself on the ski erg. And because I get visited by a lot of elite athletes that are competing in the sport and have done their due diligence and learned how to do this correctly. I just find that, this is showing that during the finish, your hands should not go too much below your hips.
Having a tall, kind of that tall chest helps with a lot of things, mainly also breathing. But we do see people who are hinging so much, especially the females, that they're almost hitting their heads on the flywheel, which you have to then lift that much weight to get back up to the catch position again. So, again, it's, diminishing return, what amount of movement will get you power without having you make you work harder than you need to, that kind of thing. But,
well, so the stroke rate and just the damper setting and all these variables that you have to consider. Now, I've been told, and I want you to correct me, because I came to you because I know who could possibly know more about this than you. You're exposed to it every day of your life for the past 27 years. So I was told that setting the damper between 3 and 5 is much more efficient than trying to hammer it out at the top end of the damper at around 8 or 9, something like this. At least on the Ski Erg. Now, is that similar theory for the rowing machine?
It is for the rowing machine, but there's some other variables that are in there. One of which stroke rate is a big thing. If you have a higher stroke rate, or you're a larger athlete, you can vary from that. Basically, I tell people, if you come to me and say, I do my best rowing and skiing at an 8 to a 10, I said, I will guarantee you I can improve your scores by knocking that lower. And basically increasing stroke rate a little bit. Also, where are you applying the force? Because what people don't realize, acceleration is one of the factors in the monitor. So how fast can you get that flywheel spinning between strokes is very important. So we know the inertia of the flywheel. So that calculation's in there. We know how fast it's slowing down between strokes, which is what your damper setting is. And then it takes into consideration how fast are you making it go from the catch position. And that's what's going to give you your pace or your wattage or any of that stuff. So people really should play around, I guess, a little bit, starting with, like you said, that between 3 to 5 or 3 to 6, and then go a little higher, go a little lower, and see what works best for them. When I say size, though, too, so some of your larger athletes, like say Hunter or some of these elite males that are going 215, 220, they have another thing going for them. And that's especially on the rowing machine, as they're driving back down the rail, they have the inertia of their body weight also assisting them. So sometimes they can handle a heavier load than say a 114-pound person on there. So there's other factors to it, and we do have great resources on our website, and people should watch the videos and read. We have a blog post called Damper Setting 101 and explains it in detail. But if someone came to me not knowing what to do, I would put them at about maybe a 3 to 5 or maybe a 4 to 7, depending on male, female, small body type, large body type, but definitely not higher than that. So
I assume that it also relates to the distance you plan on traveling or competing on. So 1 kilometer
absolutely
event, you can certainly exhaust more energy than if you're trying to do a 10-kilometer event.
Absolutely. And so whenever I travel for work, there's always it's like the bar trick. Let's see your 500 meter. Well, yeah, I'm going to go much higher on 500 meter because I can handle that pain and that load for that time. There's no way I would keep it at that damper setting, like you said, for a 2K. I go as further that on our monitors, you can actually find the drag factor as opposed to, which is the actual numerical number of representing how fast the flywheel slows down. So for me on a rower that's fairly new and the fan isn't clogged with dust, my sweet spot for 1,000 to 2,000 meter on the rower would probably be about a 117 to 120, which is about a 3 or a 4. So regardless of where I go in the world, whether I'm going to Denver at high altitude or I'm here in Vermont, I set my damper based on the drag factor because it could be different. Based on how thick the air is, or especially if you go to a gym. If you're going to do this in a gym and you're at home and you keep your machine nice and clean and there's no dust on the screen that goes around it, that could be different than if you went to a gym to train and it had dust bunnies in the flywheel and it was clogging the holes. So regardless of what my damper was set at, if I set it to my drag factor, I'll know it'll feel just like at home, no matter where I'm at. So the problem in Hyrox, though, is you really don't get a chance to mess with your rower until you're in the race. But nice thing about it, all those machines, we help them with machines, and they're all pretty new and clean. And even if they're banged up, they're not that old. So the chances of them being dirty on the inside is almost zero. So
the damper setting, as I understand it, is you could change it once. So if you show up on a machine and the athlete prior to you had it set on 9 and you're rowing along for a second, you go, oh shit, and you realize that you needed to be at 4, you got to pause and pull it down and then, get back into work. The other thing that you kind of touched on, but I wanted to ask you, because I've heard this, is one of the key things with both of those or all three of those devices is to keep the fan from slowing down. So if you could keep momentum on the fan, there's less resistance to get it going again.
I mean, more so with the bike, you want to keep that spin-like motion. With the ski erg and the rower, you can let it slow down. If you like that feeling of purchase when you apply pressure, then you can have, that's why you have to mess around with stroke rating and things like that. Like I personally might have my damper set at a 3 or a 5, but based on my stroke rate, I like to feel a little bit of, say, platform or pressure when I go to either drive back with my quads or pull with my core. I want to feel that load. I don't want it to feel so light that I'm not getting that like I gotta apply pressure on it. So again, that's something that people should try to do in the race scenario. Like you were saying, just like in the old triathlon days, learning transitions where I come up to the rower, I sit down before I strap my feet in, I set my damper, then I put my feet in, then I grab the handle. It should be second nature that they go in that order. Same with the ski ergs, a little easier. You come in, you set your damper, you grab your handles, and then what I like to do at the start on both is to really get the flywheel moving fast. So I'll do quarter, half, full stroke. So it's like almost like you're going, quarter hard, half hard, then another full stroke, and then I get into my normal known stroke rate, my pace I want, and I just sit there and then try to be conservative until the last, 200 meters, and then it's just go for it if that's the plan, from there. So
yeah, I've seen a lot of the athletes do that, where they kind of get the thing going with some short strokes, and then they get into their rhythm and they just go for it. I am not great at it. To be honest with you, the rowing machine just kills me. I mean, I probably because I'm just an old fat man, but I love the ski erg. I love the ski erg because I just feel like I can use my energy and my body weight to my best advantage. But I don't know. It's all good. The other thing, but being a gym owner back in the day, the one thing that, globally that I like about the products is that there's fewer working parts. It's like being a gym owner and having treadmills where you got to replace the roller. You got the electronics went out on it. There's always some damn thing that needs to be fixed. Anything that's got some electronics associated with a motor, it's like a nightmare. It's like you just know that it's just not if, it's just a matter of when it's going to go out. These things are impervious to damage. It's like you really got to work hard to screw one of these things up, right?
Well, and actually even, accuracy from one to the other. Our machines have to be super accurate. There's people who are making or not making Olympic teams by hundreds of seconds based on erg scores. There's CrossFit Games where $1 million could be on the line. There's Hyrox now. So it's good that there's few moving parts for several reasons. It's inexpensive to keep them running like new for 50, 60 years. They just go forever. Our parts are very cheap. So if you do need to replace them, they're there. But also with less moving parts, there's less chance that one machine could be faster than the other. They all self-calibrate between, the ski erg and the biker self-calibrate between strokes on the spin down. So you can guarantee that lane 1 is the same as lane 10, which it needs to be. Like I said, the owners of the company are former Olympic rowers and rowed at a high level. They're not about to ruin someone's career or their great day in a competition because something on our machine went wrong, so.
Yeah. So and the watts that they're generating, are that pretty accurate?
Yeah, it's all based on the same calculations that we've been using forever. A lot of it is based on, before every machine that leaves, every flywheel is inertia tested and balanced, and everything's absolutely adhered to. So now whether or not it's, I could ask the engineers, they would know, but like for me with wattage, that they use watts to calculate the other distances, but I typically don't use watts unless we are doing, again, like the bar trick, how many watts can you get? And all of us just hammering to see how high a number we can get. But as far as an actual electrical watt, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, well, I understand that. Again, every time we do testing here and the guys get on the either one of the devices, they want to set it at the 500 meters. And now I want you to set it on watts. And they're like, why? I said, because I want to see what you're generating relative to the heart rate and relative to the respiratory exchange. I want to see how many calories are going away relative to carbohydrate versus fat. And I want to see the watts that are causing that to occur. I said, I'm not that concerned about your pace, and then we could start looking at it and say, well, we know that your threshold, if you get over 150 beats per minute, just hypothetically, that the expense becomes untenable. You're digging yourself a hole that you're not going to be able to pull yourself out of. So you need to level up somewhere below that mark, at least for the majority of the effort. And so you need to know what you're going to generate relative to that expense. And obviously, that's the geek in me that's looking at that. Most guys, they're not thinking about that. They just want to see what their pace is going to look like over that 500 meters. And
I think you're doing it right too. That makes total sense the way you're using it. And actually, when we talk about cyclical things, you look back at the Olympic rowers back in the early 80s, everything was watts. And then something changed and everybody went to pace. And now we're seeing, and I think for the same reason you're using it, when you have a number like a watt, it will translate over to the other, calculations that you're using better than pace and, anything else. So I should learn watts more. Like the cycling community has never left watts, and now it's kind of bleeding over into this, and it makes sense using it the way you're using it.
What's interesting is I spent a lot of time with power meters and power with cycling and triathlon, and a lot of these guys have gotten so far away from heart rate that all they're exclusively looking at is power output. So they're looking at watts, and so they do an FTP, functional threshold power test, to try to determine what their pace should look like relative to the watts they're generating, but they're not looking at the expense. And it's like the pancakes without the syrup. You need both. If you really want to be effective, you need to know. It's like I give you a credit card, and you're 15 years old, and you just think it's like, yeah, I could just do this all day long. There's a limit to what you can get away with, So, obviously the scenario is that most people don't have access to the type of equipment that I have to do this kind of work. The general population, they're rarely going to be set up to go get a VO2 max test somewhere, especially with someone that's going to look at the data in the way that we do it. Because, our game, I'm a coach too. So my game is, how are things working towards competition? I'm not going to give you just a fitness score and say, hey, look at that, you're healthy, you've got a nice VO2 score. That's not what we're doing here.
Well, I think people forget too, and I did too, is like Hyrox is a long race. It's not, I tend to look at it at the segments that I have to do, and maybe not long like an Ironman or something like that. But, when I was used to the last, 20 years or so of doing CrossFit events where it's, maybe a 4-minute test, it might be a 30-minute test, but rarely more than that. Way back in the 80s, I did some triathlons. That was like the last time I did it, kind of like super long distance, maybe the occasional ski marathon, but that's like once every couple of years. And so, I realized that I was looking at it as individual events and not looking at the amount of expenditure for the whole race. And that's something that next time I do one, I'm gonna think twice about. So
talking about CrossFit, let's share this with you. You might even know her. This is Jen Ryan. Jen Ryan has been to the CrossFit Games. I don't even know how many times. But I wrote a program for CrossFitters, and I took them out of their comfort and brought them in, and we started looking at the expense of work relative to the cardio components. And I actually wrote a program where we developed protocols to improve their staying power. And we saw some really astounding results, not just in their ability to produce work over the time frame, but their strength went up. Right. So you start noticing that I had a guy, I think he's in Switzerland, got a master's degree in exercise science. People buy your stuff. You don't know where they live, The guy sent me an email one day and he goes, hey, I don't know what you did. He goes, but this was crazy. I did your program, 8 weeks program. I saw a 230% improvement in my strength in 8 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, the first thought I had is that bullshit, And then I looked at it, and then he started emailing me, hey, so when's the next, iteration of this going to be? I want to follow it again. And, and you know how it is. It's like in most CrossFit boxes, the big guy in the rooms, everybody wants to do what he's doing or she's doing, right? They have no original thought. They're going to follow the leader, and that's kind of the case with almost all sports, right? But this was such a novel concept to training, and just being able to brave it, just being able to have the guts to try something new and then see what it turned out. But this guy was blown away. He goes, I cannot believe. He goes, it's like if I would have got, a 50% improvement in my strength over the course of those 8 weeks, I would have been astounded. I would have been, elated. But he showed me the numbers. And I actually got to a place where I did a podcast with him. I invited him on and said, here, people, here's the guy. If you thought I was pulling your leg, here's the guy. You tell him, did it happen or didn't it happen? He explained it. So I had, in this little setting, this video I just showed you, I had Jen Ryan. I had Lauren Fisher. You know Lauren Fisher?
Yeah. Actually, I remember when that video came out because I was kind of following what you were doing back then too.
Yeah. So we took this sampling of people and we put them through this process and did some tests on them. And on that dry erase board let's pull it back up here. On the dry erase board, what I'm looking at is not just what their heart rate's doing, the watts they're generating, and their perceived exertion. I give a lot of credence to what their perceived exertion is doing. How does it feel when you're here? And it could very well be that they've developed a comfort level well beyond their theoretical threshold. I found this to be the case with Hunter McIntyre. And Hunter and I have worked together for 10 years. I've spent a lot of time with him. And I've watched him evolve from sport to sport to sport. And, as his body morphs relative to task. So he came from an endurance background, decided to go to the CrossFit, find a way to get to the CrossFit Games. He managed to pull it off. Spent a lot of time working on his strength because you know how it is. It takes years to develop the kind of strength that these guys put down in these events. And so he was trying to fast track it to try to get strong enough to compete. But his body's changing, right? And he used to hold a threshold that was sitting around 160 beats per minute. 160 beats per minute, he was processing about 60% of the energy was coming from fat. And I've actually taken him out and run him for a half marathon where I tracked him, be next to him, held his pace back to that heart rate. And he'd run a sub 6 minute pace for 13 miles at 210 pounds. Right?
Wow. Yeah.
And then got into CrossFit and then got into Hyrox, and his evolution going from dense muscle to dense muscle, his threshold dropped by about 30 beats. So he was no longer this aerobic machine. He was more of an anaerobic machine. But his capacity to compete, he races at 165, 170. He's somewhere over 30 beats over what is theoretically his threshold, and is able to hold it for at least an hour, right? And so it's for me, it's fascinating to see how all this kind of shakes out, and just kind of mess around with these different athletes for different sports. But clearly, right now, my jam is the Hyrox thing.
Well, I think it's good, and I think you're going to get more business because it is a little bit of addicting. Like you do one, you get your score and your time, but you always walk away going, I could have done better. And you start looking at the components, and then, before you know it, I mean, the way you're doing it is much smarter than the rest of us that are just doing perceived exertion and guessing on where their weak points are. And it is cool that they give you the split times per event, which is great. But also too, the more you do in learning the race and how many laps you have to do, and it always changes and all that stuff is something that takes a little bit more to figure out, but I don't think it's going anywhere for a while.
No, I had a conversation with some of the guys. I say some of the guys because I really don't know them, but they represented Hyrox. And I think it was DC. I was standing there with one of my clients, and a guy walked up and said, "Hey, you're Richard Diaz." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, I'm so-and-so, I'm with Hyrox, and we'd like to have a meeting with you." I said,
"Oh, wow."
I said, "Really?" I said, "What are we going to talk about?" He goes, "Well, we've been following your work, and we want to have a conversation with you." So I said, "Fine." And we got together, and they were talking to me about their education. They were interested in me for their education. And then they started to lay out their grand scheme. And they have some pretty lofty goals, and I'm sure you're probably aware of this. Their interest is to end up in all of the health clubs. They want to be the fitness modality across the globe. And I don't know. I mean, that's huge.
Well, now with the different VO2 max kind of wireless units that you can use now, I mean, I could see someday that in the gyms that you could sign up for an evaluation using your protocol, and if nothing else, clear up that perceived exertion, max heart rate or heart rate versus VO2, and that's probably going to move people higher up faster than actually just kind of like thinking what their pace should be and things. It'd be really interesting.
Well, I got to tell you, I've been testing athletes for 30 years now. And I mean, I've tested everything. If it's got legs on it, I take that back. I've had some people I've tested that didn't have legs, right?
Yeah.
I bet you know her. Do you know who Tatiana McFadden is?
I don't think so.
She has spinal bifida, so she races in a chair, 3-wheeled chair, marathon.
Okay.
She's won the 5 major marathons like 4 years consecutively, right? She does not lose. And I tested her for ESPN Sports Science. So anyway, that's not the point. But I've tested a lot of different kinds of athletes, right? But when I first started getting into doing this work, I thought, my God, why isn't everybody doing this? Why isn't every gym in the country having somebody that's knowledgeable enough in the equipment to produce this work for their clientele? It just took me by, and I felt like I was in a race. I said, I got to get out there and get this going, because somebody's gonna eat my lunch sooner or later, And here I am 30 years later, and I'm still uncontested. It's not like I don't, So I think it would be. I know they're coming out with these handheld devices and wireless devices, and it doesn't make a difference how unique and how cool the devices are. It comes down to the intellect. What do you know to do with this information once you get it? What is it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And this is
and I think you're right. I mean, most trainers, I think this is why you haven't seen it more, is like there's a lot of good trainers out there, but they might not have worked in a human performance lab. So they'll teach you how to use the equipment. They're very knowledgeable maybe on periodization and strength training and all that stuff, but the larger concept of training to the goal, looking at other physiological effects, is not usually their jam. I mean, my degree is in health science. I had to volunteer to work in the human performance lab because I found that interesting. But there's a lot of people that were in my degree that never did a lactate test on anybody, never helped do a VO2 max test. And even myself, I did administer the tests, but I couldn't take that information and really utilize it to help someone improve their performance. I mean, I probably would have to study a lot more specifically on that end of it. So.
Well, it takes a lot of time too. It's tenure. Because I've had a chance to experience the work with so many different types. I used to do the preseason diagnostics for the LA Kings. I would do anaerobic power and aerobic power tests on all the players on the preseason. I have 52 players in a day, right? So I learned a lot about hockey players in the 3 years I worked with. So hockey, I worked with basketball, football, professional boxers. And so you're starting to gather this information about these different sects. You're finding, well, this type of athlete responds this way versus that type of athlete. And it's not just like a cookie cutter thing where they all kind of fit in this box and you're trying to drill them into this space. They're unique to their sport. And I mean, when I first started doing this work with obstacle course racing athletes, I was taken back by how high the thresholds were on most of these guys. I thought my equipment was jacked up. I'm like, this can't be true. I mean, how could you possibly? And then I started looking at it, and if you really think about it, because the musculature that they're using during the activities that they're in, it's not like, for example, with triathlon or even cycling, it's all leg dependent. Yeah. A marathoner, it's all leg dependent. There's rare, I mean, they look like praying mantises. They have no biceps.
Yeah.
The idea of swinging, across things, climbing ropes, and you're getting a lot of upper body involved. And that's endurance-based upper body activity with lower body activity. You're just providing more places for the oxygen to go. That's my conclusion. It might be a logical, dumb conclusion, but that's kind of what I took away from it. And
so that's like you said before, and why I think I like Hyrox and why I liked when I got into CrossFit when I did is that, well, especially for me personally, is like I will never be a professional athlete, especially not at 54 now. But if I want to be a well-rounded athlete, I want to go running with my friends that are runners. I want to go biking with my friends that are bikers. And I want to lift weights like with my friends that are weightlifters. And I don't have to be the best at any one, but I want to be able to do all of it. And I want to be able to do it till I'm in my, hopefully triple digits, if, God willing, something like that. And I think people who train for Hyrox and even, maybe not competitive CrossFit, but CrossFit has a methodology, I think we do build a better athlete. And that's why I'm really excited when I saw the body types of the Hyrox athletes. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. They're good runners. They're adequately strong. They can go for 50 minutes or whatever, no problem. It's, I think it's good. And I think that's why it's going to stick around. It's not so specific to one body type, which is good.
No. And they're definitely molding monsters. They're getting I've seen some, these seem like they're getting bigger and bigger all the time. The average elite guys, push the theory is if you're not 180 pounds, you're never going to get to the elite stage in this sport. And I don't know that is true or not, but I would, if I was to build an athlete, he wouldn't be 180 pounds for that sport. He'd be bigger. He'd be maybe 195, 200 pounds. So.
As officially being a short guy, at 5'9", I do think that you're going to have a taller athlete in Hyrox just because if nothing else, the rowing, the distance you travel in a burpee, broad jump, your wall balls will benefit a taller athlete. But that could be the ranting of a short guy for that. But, there's a lot of the 8 movements where stride length, body height is beneficial. I don't know if Hyrox would ever change the movements, but I think that there could probably drop in 1 or 2 that would be less height beneficial, I would think, but I don't see them changing it for a while.
I hope they don't change a thing. I hope they continue to do exactly what they're doing. And as soon as you start messing around with the equation, you start pissing people off. So I think it's got to leave that sleeping dog lie and just here's the game. All comers, let's see what you can do. By the way,
and they've got thousands of data points now too. We can't mess with either. So
not for nothing, but I have some shorter athletes that I work with that are in Hyrox, and most of them that I work with, their jam is the burpee broad jump.
Really? So I was doing it. It was also the first time I've ever really done. I do burpees all the time, but never with that really explosive drive. And I had a guy who showed me later. He's like, you might not want to be trying to go as far each time and try to just increase your turnover rate. And I'm like, couldn't have told me that before I did it. But so, there's definitely some technique stuff I'm just looking off mine.
Yeah, you're a big guy for your weight or for your height, though. So it's really about moving mass. Really, at the end of the day, I think.
And like I said, I also went for a PR on my 1K row just because I was a Concept 2 guy. So, yeah.
So are you going to go to Dallas?
I don't know yet. There's a chance. There's a chance that will be there. So it's so close to Austin, and there's so many good athletes living in Austin right now that are friends that we work with for other things, that of all the ones coming up, that might be one that we go to, or I go to.
I plan on going. My hotel's booked. My flight's paid for. I'm going. I have a handful of guys that I coach that are racing there. And everybody, Hunter especially, barks at me. He goes, dude, you're like a little shell. You're in a clam somewhere. Nobody can find you. He goes, you're like hiding in the swamp in Tennessee. He goes, you need to get out. You got to get out. Let people see you, man. And I'm like, oh shit, I don't know if I want to go. I'm not a.
I think that would be a good one.
Yeah, I'm not a good spectator. I have been. I went to DC and I went to Chicago. I didn't go to New York. And I thought, I got to pick one. And I thought, you know what? I've been to Dallas. I'd rather go to Dallas than go back to Chicago. I don't know why.
I think it's going to be a good one this year. And then, who knows? I haven't talked to him in a long time, but I mean, it'd be cool to see Lance have another go at it. That might be, it's not far from where he's living. I think that'd be cool. There's a bunch of good trainers out of On It gyms in San Antonio, or in Austin. That would be, I think they're planning on doing it. They're starting to do a little bit more training for their members that are doing Hyrox. So, it's one of those things though. I enjoy being in a show like you up here in Vermont, but I do have to travel like we were talking about before. I don't like the travel, but I like being there and I like being with the athletes. It's the in-between. It's getting to those places and getting back is the part that sucks. So.
Well, I've seen, I have so many people that I worked with and I bump into them at these events and it's kind of like a homecoming, it's like, I need to do it. I don't know. I'm getting lazy in my old age, I guess. Well, anyway,
if you go, you should do it. Yeah, just don't let anyone know who you are and just do it.
If you do happen to get out there, you should let me know. Maybe we're planning a visit to a steakhouse in Dallas after the event. So if you're a carnivore,
I definitely eat my meat. Meat is my jam. That's it.
Yeah, we're planning on having a post-event soiree at this fancy steakhouse. And if you're going to be there, I'll give you the details, and you can come out and we'll have I'll
definitely hit you up if we're going to be there. If we go, we'll have a booth. We don't always have a booth at these events just because there's so many of them. But if we're sending people from work or myself, then we'll have a booth and a table, and it's good because we get a chance to work on technique with people either before they race or after they race, and a lot of times just cleaning up the real ugly stuff just to help them a little bit. And so it's good for us to be there. And we're going to be doing more stuff with them on technique online and their website and things like that, so people can stay tuned to see that stuff coming up. So,
well, there is a wealth of information on your website. I will say that. I went there prior to our getting together, and I'd been there before, but I just kind of glazed over things. But there's a lot of good information in there. A lot of good information in the videos on technique. I downloaded this. Where's it at here? Somewhere. Boom. Pacing chart.
Oh yeah.
I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. Because you would think I'm a good numbers guy. I'm a terrible numbers guy. I'm a broad stroke guy, But
for you and I both, and I'm not a numbers guy, there's actually a pace calculator that you don't even need the chart. You just put in pace, it will show you the watts. If you put in watts, it'll show you the pace. You can put in the distance and it will tell you the pace. That's one of the things I used and didn't tell my friends about that either, because that was always my ace in the hole. And so, I kind of keep that to myself, and they're like, oh, you just sat on that pace the whole time. And I'm like, yeah, because I figured out what it needed to be to beat your time, Is
it in the app?
What's that? No, it's on the actual website. If you search pace calculator, it'll come right up.
Oh, nice.
So,
Cool. Well, look, Greg, I really appreciate you doing this with me. I really hope that we're going to bump into each other in Dallas. I mean, you know, you're fit. You still got time. You can get this done, buddy. You can get in there and knock that out.
you know what? Actually, I would like to try sometime is the team event. It looked really fun. You know, maybe Hunter owes me and he can be my partner and then we could go for something. So I just need a really fast partner is what I need.
Well, we talked about him coming. He was telling me that he wasn't interested in going solo. If he shows up, he's going to come as a doubles. He's trying to get Sandberg, I guess his name is, from England to come and be his partner.
Yeah.
He also mentioned there was a wedding this way that he was hoping to come by, and he wants to swing by my place. We'll see. You know, in one ear, out the other one, I get it from him. So, but anyway, it was a pleasure, and you guys are doing God's work, man. I mean, you got a great set of tools, and just the longevity of that company is just awesome. It's just incredibly awesome.
Well, we're very proud of it, and like I said, it's more of it is a family business, and we feel like we work for the owners like their relatives, and so everyone's really committed here. But also, too, when you said about the website, I just want to say, you know, if there's something that someone can't find on the website, we're one of a few companies where if you call the 800 number, you will talk to one of us, and we will find someone to get you an answer, regardless if it's training, machine maintenance, anything. You know, we're all here. That's what we do. You know, our number is still on the website. You can still call us. You can chat on there. And we take it seriously. So